February 24, 2022, 5 a.m. Kyiv time. Explosions echo across Ukraine's capital as Russian missiles rain down from the night sky. In the largest military invasion Europe has witnessed since Adolf Hitler's armies swept across the continent, Vladimir Putin unleashes a full-scale assault on his neighbor. This is not just another regional conflict. This is the story of how a single decision by one man would trigger the bloodiest war of the 21st century. A conflict that would claim hundreds of thousands of lives, displace millions, and fundamentally reshape the global order. Over the next 50 minutes, you'll witness the untold stories of this war, from the apocalyptic Battle of Bakhmut, where 20,000 mercenaries died in a single city, to the secret technology that's revolutionizing modern combat, from Ukraine's audacious invasion of Russia itself, to the drones that cost $300 but destroy million-dollar tanks. To understand why this war happened, we need to go back. Not months, but decades. December 1991. The Soviet Union collapses. Ukraine declares independence, becoming the second largest country in Europe by landmass. In Budapest 3 years later, Ukraine makes a fateful decision. It surrenders the world's third largest nuclear arsenal in exchange for security guarantees from Russia, the United States, and the United Kingdom. For Vladimir Putin, who calls the Soviet collapse the greatest geopolitical catastrophe of the 20th century, Ukraine's independence is an open wound. In his worldview, Ukraine isn't a real nation. It's historically Russian territory that must be reclaimed. The first shots are fired in 2014. When Ukraine's pro-Russian president flees after massive protests, Putin strikes. Russian forces, stripped of insignia, the infamous Little Green Men, seize Crimea in a lightning operation. In eastern Ukraine's Donbass region, a separatist war erupts backed by Russian weapons, money, and volunteers. Over the next 8 years, 14,000 people die in a frozen conflict that never makes Western headlines. But in the fall of 2021, something changes. American intelligence satellites detect a massive Russian military buildup along Ukraine's borders. Tanks, artillery, mobile hospitals, not training equipment, invasion equipment. Western leaders issue warnings. Putin issues demands. Ukraine must never join NATO. The West must withdraw forces from Eastern Europe. Return to 1997 borders. The demands are impossible. Everyone knows it. And on February 24, 2022, at exactly 5 a.m., the largest invasion force assembled in Europe since World War II crosses the border. The plan is called Operation Zida, three-pronged assault designed to decapitate the Ukrainian government in 72 hours. Russian airborne troops assault Hostomel Airport outside Kyiv to create an air bridge for reinforcements. Armored columns race toward the capital from Belarus. In the east and south, hundreds of thousands of Russian troops surge forward. The world watches, expecting Ukraine to fall within days. CIA estimates give Kyiv 48 hours. Some Russian soldiers reportedly pack parade uniforms, expecting a victory march through Ukrainian streets. But something unexpected happens. Ukraine doesn't collapse. President Volodymyr Zelensky, a former comedian offered evacuation by the United States, delivers a response that will echo through history. "I need ammunition, not a ride." At Hostomel Airport, Ukrainian forces counterattack. Russian paratroopers among Moscow's elite are surrounded and decimated. The air bridge never opens. On the highways leading to Kyiv, Russian tank columns encounter fierce resistance. Ukrainian soldiers armed with American Javelin and British NLAW anti-tank missiles turn Russia's 40-mile convoy into a graveyard of burning steel. By early April, the unthinkable happens. Russian forces retreat from Kyiv entirely. Ukraine has won the first round. But when Ukrainian troops enter the liberated town of Bucha, they discover something that will define the war's brutality. Bodies in the streets, civilians with hands bound executed, mass graves, evidence of torture. Bucha becomes synonymous with war crimes. Russia denies everything, but satellite imagery doesn't lie. The war everyone expected to end in days has only just begun. Summer 2022, the front lines stabilize into a 600-mile wound cutting. Across eastern and southern Ukraine, Russia abandons its goal of regime change. Now the objective is territorial conquest. Seize as much Ukrainian land as possible before winter. And in the Donbass, one city becomes the focal point of the entire war: Bakhmut. Before the war, Bakhmut was home to 80,000 people, a regional city known for its salt mines and sparkling wine production. Nothing strategically critical, nothing worth dying for. But in war, symbolism often matters more than strategy. Enter Yevgeny Prigozhin, a convicted criminal turned caterer turned warlord. His private army, the Wagner Group, has fought in Syria, Libya, and across Africa. Now Putin unleashes them on Bakhmut with a singular mission: take the city, at any cost. Prigozhin's secret weapon isn't advanced technology. It's human expendability. He tours Russian prisons, making an offer to murderers, rapists, and thieves. Fight for 6 months in Ukraine and receive a pardon. Survive and you're free. 50,000 convicts accept. Most have no military training. They're given minimal equipment and sent forward in human wave attacks that military historians will compare to World War I. The assault begins in August 2022, but it's in the winter months that Bakhmut transforms into hell on earth. Wagner sends convicts forward in waves, 20, 30, 40 men at a time. Ukrainian machine guns cut them down. The survivors advance 10 meters. The next wave attacks. 10 meters. 50 lives. Next wave, Ukrainian soldiers give their commander, Oleksandr Syrsky, a grim nickname, the Butcher, and General 200, Cargo 200 being the Soviet military code for body bags. Some estimates suggest the average Ukrainian soldier's survival time in Bakhmut is just 3 days. But the Ukrainians hold week after week, month after month. By spring 2023, Prigozhin is publicly raging at Russian military leadership. His men lack ammunition. They lack support. In one video, he stands among dozens of bodies, his own fighters, screaming obscenities at Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu. On May 24, 2023, Prigozhin makes a stunning admission. 20,000 Wagner fighters have been killed in Bakhmut. Half were convicts. Half were his professional mercenaries. Later investigations will suggest the true number may exceed 40,000 casualties, killed and wounded. Ukraine's losses are also catastrophic, though Kyiv refuses to release exact figures. Western intelligence estimates suggest tens of thousands of Ukrainian casualties in Bakhmut alone. In May 2023, Russia finally claims victory in Bakhmut. But it's a Pyrrhic triumph. The city they've captured no longer exists. Every building is damaged or destroyed. The ground is pockmarked with craters. Unexploded ordnance litters every street. Military analysts call it a meat grinder. Others compare it to Verdun, the World War, a battle where 700,000 men died over 10 months for negligible territorial gain. Russia gained approximately 200 square kilometers. The cost: an entire mercenary army destroyed. Relationships between the Wagner Group and Russian military command shattered. And 6 weeks after victory, Prigozhin will launch a short-lived mutiny, marching on Moscow itself before his mysterious death in a plane crash. Bakhmut epitomizes everything about this war: brutal, attritional, catastrophically expensive in human life, and ultimately indecisive. But while the world fixated on Bakhmut, Ukraine was planning something audacious. Fall 2022. As Russian forces grind forward in Bakhmut, Ukraine launches Operation Kharkiv. Using speed, deception, and concentrated force, Ukrainian troops punch through Russian lines in the northeast, liberating thousands of square kilometers in days. The success is stunning. Russian forces flee, abandoning weapons, vehicles, and equipment. Some units reportedly learn of the offensive through social media because their own communication networks have collapsed. A month later, Ukraine liberates Kherson City, the only regional capital Russia had captured. Civilians pour into the streets, weeping with joy as Ukrainian flags rise over public buildings. For a brief moment, it seems Ukraine might win this war outright. But the window closes quickly. Russia responds with mass mobilization. 300,000 men are drafted. Putin annexes 4 Ukrainian regions, Donetsk, Luhansk, Zaporizhzhia, and Kherson, in a ceremony at the Kremlin, despite not fully controlling any of them. And Russia begins building defense lines that will define the war's second phase. The Surovikin Line, named after a Russian general, consists of concrete dragon's teeth, minefields kilometers deep and interconnected trenches. It's the most extensive defensive network constructed in Europe since World War II. By June 2023, Ukraine is ready for its long-anticipated counteroffensive. Western-supplied Leopard tanks, Bradley fighting vehicles, and Storm Shadow missiles give Ukrainian forces capabilities they've never possessed. The goal: break through Russian lines in the south, reach the Sea of Azov, cut Russia's land bridge to Crimea. The offensive begins on June 6th, and almost immediately it stalls. Russian minefields are far denser than anticipated. Artillery and attack helicopters devastate Ukrainian armor in open fields. Without air superiority, Ukrainian mechanized forces cannot maneuver as Western doctrine demands. By fall, the counteroffensive has achieved minimal gains at enormous cost. The front lines barely move. Neither side can achieve breakthrough. The war has reached a stalemate, a brutal, grinding, attritional stalemate where both sides lose thousands of men for tiny territorial adjustments. It's 1917 on the Western Front, but with drones instead of biplanes. And then, in August 2024, Ukraine does something no military expert predicted. Ukraine invades Russia. For months, Ukrainian troops have been infiltrating into Russia's Kursk Oblast, hiding in forests just across the border. On August 6, 2024, 3 brigades, Ukraine's best equipped and most experienced, surge forward in a lightning assault. It's the first time since World War II that foreign troops have occupied Russian territory. The attack achieves complete surprise. Russian border guards are overwhelmed. Conscript units in the area, poorly trained and equipped, collapse immediately. Within a week, Ukraine has captured nearly 400 square miles of Russian territory and 28 settlements. Ukrainian President Zelensky calls it a preventative strike to create a buffer zone, not on Ukrainian territory, but on Russia's. The strategic calculus is clear. Force Russia to divert troops from Ukraine's east, capture Russian soldiers for prisoner exchanges, and demonstrate that Russia itself is vulnerable. Russia responds with fury. 50,000 troops are rushed to the area, elite paratroopers, Chechen units, and eventually, 12,000 North Korean soldiers who will deploy to European soil for the first time in history. The North Korean troops suffer catastrophic casualties. Reports describe them advancing in human waves, reminiscent of Korean War tactics, only to be decimated by modern weapons. By October 2024, the Kursk operation has achieved mixed results. Ukraine holds territory inside Russia, but at enormous cost. Thousands of Ukrainian soldiers, troops desperately needed elsewhere, are tied down defending Russian villages. Meanwhile, Russian forces continue advancing in eastern Ukraine, threatening key cities like Pokrovsk. The gambit raises fundamental questions. Is occupying Russian territory worth weakening other fronts? Can Ukraine sustain a two-front war against a nation with 3 times its population? The answers remain unclear. While generals debate strategy and politicians argue over aid packages, a quiet revolution is transforming warfare itself. Not in think tanks or defense contractors' boardrooms, but in makeshift workshops across Ukraine. This is where the real innovation happens. Engineers, hobbyists, and civilians build weapons that would have seemed like science fiction just 5 years ago. First-person view drones, FPV drones, that cost $300 but can destroy tanks worth $3 million. Here's how it works. A pilot wearing video goggles sits kilometers from the front line. Through a camera mounted on a racing drone modified to carry explosives, they see exactly what the drone sees. Flying at speeds exceeding 100 kilometers per hour, the pilot guides the drone directly into Russian tanks, artillery pieces, or infantry positions. The impact is devastating. A shaped charge warhead can penetrate tank armor. Even without penetration, the explosion can disable sensors, tracks, or turret mechanisms. The economics are staggering. A Russian T-90M tank costs approximately $4 million. The FPV drone that destroys it costs $300. That's a cost ratio of more than 13,000 to 1. Ukraine is producing these drones by the thousands. Some estimates suggest over 100,000 per month by late 2024. But Russia adapts. They deploy electronic warfare systems to jam drone signals. They attach protective cages to tank turrets, creating cope cages that sometimes detonate drones prematurely. They train soldiers to shoot down drones with shotguns and automatic weapons. Ukraine adapts in turn. They develop AI-guided drones that can complete attacks even if the signal is jammed. They create drone swarms, multiple drones attacking simultaneously to overwhelm defenses. They build kamikaze sea drones that attack Russian warships in the Black Sea, forcing Russia's Black Sea fleet to withdraw from Crimea. This technological arms race is redefining what warfare means. Traditional metrics, tank numbers, artillery tubes, aircraft carriers, matter less when a teenager with a drone controller can destroy armor from 10 kilometers away. The war has become a laboratory for future conflicts, and military planners worldwide are watching closely. Beyond drones, Ukraine has demonstrated the power of open-source intelligence. Volunteers thousands of miles away analyze satellite imagery to locate Russian ammunition depots. Hackers penetrate Russian military networks. Civilians with smartphones report troop movements in real time. The democratization of intelligence means Russia can hide nothing. Every convoy is photographed. Every headquarters is geolocated. Every ammunition dump is targeted within hours of detection. The technological dimension extends to artillery as well. Ukraine receives Western GPS-guided munitions, Excalibur shells that can hit targets 25 miles away with meter-level accuracy. Russia, cut off from Western technology by sanctions, struggles with precision. Where Russia must fire 50 artillery shells to destroy a target, Ukraine might need only 5. When shells cost thousands of dollars each and logistics are strained, this efficiency multiplier becomes decisive. But technology alone doesn't win wars. People do. And the human cost of this conflict is staggering beyond comprehension. By late 2024, estimates of total casualties, killed and wounded on both sides, exceed 1 million. Russia's casualties are particularly severe. Western intelligence suggests over 600,000 Russian soldiers have been killed or wounded. That's more than the entire active-duty military Russia possessed before the war began. Ukraine's losses, while lower, are still catastrophic for a nation of 40 million. Tens of thousands of soldiers have died, hundreds of thousands wounded. An entire generation scarred. The dead are not statistics. They are fathers who will never meet their children, sons who will never return home, husbands whose wives become widows. Each number represents a family destroyed, a future erased, a story that will never be told. Civilian casualties are equally horrific. Thousands killed in missile strikes, tens of thousands more in occupied territories, executed, tortured, disappeared. The UN has documented widespread evidence of sexual violence used as a weapon of war. Children kidnapped and forcibly adopted into Russian families, an act the International Criminal Court calls a war crime and the basis for issuing an arrest warrant for Vladimir Putin himself. The infrastructure destruction is apocalyptic. Entire cities, Mariupol, Bakhmut, Avdiivka, reduced to rubble. Power plants destroyed. Water treatment facilities obliterated. Schools, hospitals, apartment buildings, nothing is spared. Russia's strategy is clear. If Ukraine cannot be conquered, it will be made uninhabitable. Yet Ukraine endures. Through brutal winters without heat or electricity, through constant missile barrages, through the grinding horror of trench warfare, the Ukrainian people demonstrate a resilience that defies explanation to outsiders but makes perfect sense to them. This is their home, their land, their future, and they will not surrender it. The international response has been unprecedented in some ways, inadequate in others. The United States has provided over $100 billion in military and economic aid. European nations have sent weapons, ammunition, and humanitarian assistance. NATO has expanded with Finland and Sweden joining the alliance. A direct response to Russian aggression that Putin claims justifies his invasion. The irony is not lost on observers. Putin invaded to prevent NATO expansion and succeeded only in accelerating it. But the aid comes with frustrations. Restrictions on targeting inside Russia, debates over weapon systems, slow deliveries, political opposition in donor countries. Ukraine fights with one hand tied behind its back, forbidden from striking many legitimate military targets because they sit on Russian soil. Meanwhile, Russia faces no such restrictions and strikes Ukrainian cities with impunity. The economic war is equally significant. Western sanctions target Russia's economy, cutting access to technology, freezing assets, restricting oil exports. Russia's economy shrinks but doesn't collapse. High energy prices in 2022 provide a windfall that cushions the blow. Trade shifts eastward. China, India, and other nations that refuse to participate in sanctions. Russia becomes increasingly isolated from the West but survives economically. For Ukraine, the economic devastation is severe. GDP collapses in 2022. Millions flee as refugees. Agriculture, Ukraine's economic backbone, is disrupted by mining, shelling, and occupation. The ports are blockaded, preventing grain exports and threatening global food security. Eventually, a deal is brokered to allow grain shipments, but Russia withdraws from the agreement in 2023, resuming the blockade. The geopolitical implications extend far beyond Europe. China watches closely, drawing lessons for any potential action against Taiwan. If the West will arm Ukraine so extensively, what would they do for Taiwan? Conversely, if Ukraine eventually falls despite Western support, what message does that send? The war becomes a test case for global order itself. Nuclear threats loom constantly. Putin makes repeated references to Russia's nuclear arsenal. Western intelligence takes these threats seriously, but assesses that actual nuclear use remains unlikely. The cost to Russia would be catastrophic. Still, the possibility cannot be dismissed entirely. For the first time since the Cuban Missile Crisis, the world faces a genuine risk of nuclear escalation. As we approach 3 years of war, the end remains distant. Neither side can achieve decisive victory. Russia lacks the military capability to conquer Ukraine. Ukraine lacks the strength to expel Russia entirely from its territory. The war grinds on, consuming lives and resources in a horrific stalemate. Negotiations have been attempted repeatedly. Turkey, China, African nations all have tried to mediate, but the fundamental positions are irreconcilable. Russia demands Ukraine cede territory and abandon hopes of Western integration. Ukraine demands complete withdrawal of Russian forces and restoration of its 1991 borders, including Crimea. Neither side will compromise on these core positions. So the war continues. Every day, dozens or hundreds die. Every week, villages change hands. Every month, the casualty toll climbs higher. The front lines shift by hundreds of meters at the cost of thousands of lives. It's a mathematics of horror that no calculator can capture. What lessons can we draw from this catastrophe? First, that nuclear disarmament agreements require enforcement mechanisms. Ukraine surrendered its nukes for security guarantees that proved worthless. No nation will make that mistake again. Second, that military analysts consistently underestimate determined resistance. Ukraine was supposed to fall in days but has fought for years. Third, that technology is reshaping warfare in ways we're only beginning to understand. Fourth, that the international system struggles to respond to aggression by major powers. And fifth, that the human capacity for both cruelty and courage knows no bounds. The soldiers in the trenches don't fight for abstractions like democracy or sovereignty, though those matter. They fight for their families, their homes, the future they want their children to inherit. That's what makes this war so desperately sad and simultaneously inspiring. It's ordinary people thrust into extraordinary horror, making choices between impossible alternatives, demonstrating daily that courage is not the absence of fear but action despite it. As this documentary concludes, the war in Ukraine continues. The ending has not been written. The final casualty count is unknown. The ultimate outcome remains uncertain. What we know is this: hundreds of thousands are dead. Millions are displaced. A nation fights for survival against a superpower, and the world watches, hoping for peace but preparing for a long war. This is not the story anyone wanted to tell, but it's the story that must be told. Because forgetting the cost of war is the first step toward repeating it. And this cost, in blood, treasure, and human suffering, is too high for the world to bear again. The question is not whether Ukraine can win. The question is whether the world can afford for Ukraine to lose. Because if aggression succeeds, if might makes right, if nations can be conquered simply because they're smaller than their neighbors, then the post-World War II order collapses, and the conflicts that follow will make this war look like a preview. Ukraine fights not just for itself, but for the principle that borders matter, that sovereignty means something, that small nations have the right to exist without permission from great powers. That's why this war matters to everyone everywhere. Because tomorrow it might be your country facing invasion, and you'll hope the world responds as it has for Ukraine, imperfectly, inadequately, but ultimately on the side of justice. The war in Ukraine is the bloodiest conflict since World War II. More than 1 million casualties. 3 years of fighting. No end in sight. This is their story. May we never forget it, and may we work tirelessly to ensure it never happens again.